time, so I wasn't paying attention to time. But yeah, what I was saying, I was talking about the while loop, right? I was saying that you need to always have a number to basically to use this while loop, right? I was talking about how um, basically because you're going over a list, or not even a list, right? You can be with anything, right? Because you're going over something over and over again, you need to, tell the while loop how many times you want it to do something, right? So you always have to have some number of sort, right? So I'm gonna start by this simple example, right? And then I'll go to a more complex example here. This example will use different concepts that um, we've learned, and I think it'll be a good way to actually also be able to use the other different concepts and bring it together here. So let's start with this one, right? So let's say you want to you want to print on your console or on a screen numbers from 1 up to let's say 5,000, right? 5,000, right? I'm using 5,000 because it gives an idea of how useful this thing is, right? 6 is a small number. So, um, what you do, right? I mean, you could do print 1 up to like 5,000. You can write this like 5,000 times, or you can use a while loop, right? So, what you do first is you need to have, like I said before, a number, right? A number of times that you want this thing to print, right? So what most people do with this while loop, they usually have a variable. They have a variable. The most common name for variable people use is I. I mean, you can name it anything. You can name it even any name. For example, bootstrap or something. Just to give you an idea of it, you can name it anything. The same way you can name any variable anything. But most people use I because I kind of like when you see I, you know that this is a loop. So even in other programming languages, we use I a lot. But yeah, you can it's open to anything. Sometimes you find that let's say you've already used I, and you want to make another loop, and you need to create a new variable. So you can use J or X. That's what I do sometimes, especially when I'm working on like a long thingy of code, right? So what you do is you have I, and then you assign it a value, right? So you assign it, let's say 1. Let's say 1 in this case, right? I'll give you more examples where I don't use 1, where I use 0 or something like that, so that you can actually understand how widely you can use this, right? But yeah, let's say you give 1, like as I've done over here. Let me clear all these things. Let's say you give I the value of 1, right? 1, right? So you have a variable rather, and you give it a number. So let's just say you give it 1, right? And you want to print 1 to 5,000, right? So what you do now, is for the while loop is you say wow, right? So whenever you put wow, you even notice that the programming environment will colored in a special color because it's a very special keyword in the programming language of Python, right? Even in any other programming languages. You can't even use this as a variable name because it's specifically for this operation. So basically, you say while, uh, okay, so while I, this variable, is less than 6, right? Is less than 6. I mean, you can put anything, right? It can be is equal to 6 or is greater than 2 or something, or you know. But then one danger is always that if you don't want to do something that will go forever. So I think this is kind of confusing. So I'll explain that later. But let me just continue, right? So you say while, right? While this value that you've just given, this variable, right? It can be anything, by the way, is less than 6 or equal to or greater than. For in this case, let's just say it's less than 6. Do this, right? So what you're doing is, let me just write it down here, is you are you have a variable, a number, right? A variable, you assign it a number, right? A number can be any number. It can be 1, it can be 0, it can be 1,000, right? And then what you do is you say while this variable, right? While this variable meets a certain condition, right? Meets a certain condition, I'll just say condition, right? Then run this line of code, right? Then do this instruction, right? So while this meets a certain condition, right? I want you to complete this instruction. So I'm guessing you're probably asking that, hey, but if I've assigned this to b1, right? This will always be 1, right? If let's say x is less than 6, right? I mean x will always be less than 6. Let's say while I is less than 6, I mean I will always be less than 6 because I is 1, right? That's true actually. And that's what I was saying before I started to get confusing, was that you also have to be careful with how your instruction here has to take that into account, that it has to take into account the condition, right? Because there's this thing that people do, that you can do sometimes, where you create a loop that goes forever, right? So I can say while uh, 2 2 is equal to 5, right? No, 2 is less than 5, sorry. Let's say 2 is less than 5, right? Do this instruction, right? 2 will always be less than 5, right? So this thing will keep running indefinitely. That can slow your PC and even ruin your code, right? So you always have to do something that put something that ideally, I mean, you can put even a number here, right? But then the reason why we're using a variable, is because we're able to change a variable after an instruction has been run, right? We can change the variable in this instruction. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I'll give you another example if you don't understand this. So yeah, so we'll say that, you know whilst this variable here, whilst this condition is being met, I want you to run this instruction, right? So when you see for here, right, they say that whilst this I is less than 6, right? Because then they want to print 1 up to 6. But let's say in our case it's 5,000, right? We want to print 1 up to 5,000, right? So we say, whilst I is less than 5,000, run this instruction. Print I, right? Print I, and then when you're done with that, right? I is equal to plus equals 1. I know you're probably wondering, what does this mean? Well, basically, this is a fancy way of just saying add 1 to y, right? Add 1, sorry, I keep saying y, sorry, because I've been doing GRE math and there's always x and y. Yeah, so I, right? This is a fancy way of just saying add 1 to y. I mean, if this guy put 2 here, it could have been add 2 to I, right? But then what this means, right? You can memorize it. I encourage you to actually memorize it, because it's very useful when coding, right? Memorizing this, right? This is one way to add a value, to add a number to a variable, right? I mean, you could have also, in a simpler term, you can just write I is equal to whatever I was before. We write I again, right? Plus 1, right? This is the same as saying I plus is equal to 1, right? I hope this makes sense, right? Now I guess you're probably wondering that why are we doing this, right? Remember how I mentioned that. Oh, okay, I have 1 minute left, so let me make this quick. Remember how I mentioned that we have to always put a condition that A won't run indefinitely, that won't keep going for forever, right? Something that won't run forever. And B, ideally, because you want something that will run forever, you have to, in these instructions that you give, have to change the condition, not the condition, but the variables that have been stated in the condition, right? So what that does now is that when we say I is plus equals 1, meaning you add 1 to this one, or you can just say I is equal to whatever I is, add 1 to it, right? This is another way of writing. This is what I use sometimes. In JavaScript, they do I++. I don't know if it works here. Let me try it in this thingy. Yeah, but for now, I think just for simplicity's sake, I guess you can memorize these other ones when you in your own time. For simplicity's sake, we'll just say I is equal to I plus whatever it was. Sorry, my time is almost done, so I'll continue in the next video.